I never thought I'd meet someone by showing up at the same rundown apartment at the exact same time. But here we are. So picture this. It's a gloomy Thursday evening, and I'm standing outside a brick building that's seen better days, nervously holding my phone like it's a lifeline. I'm about to check out a Craigslist listing for a cheap place in the city, something I desperately need because my rent just doubled and my bank account is screaming. I'm a classic winging it kind of guy, so I didn't bother scheduling a formal appointment or anything fancy. The ad said quick move in, no broker fee, and honestly, that was enough to pull me in. The neighborhood smelled a bit like old pizza and damp concrete, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. I'm trying to convince myself this is going to be fine. Just as I'm about to buzz the intercom, the door creaks open, and this guy steps out ahead of me. He's probably in his late 20s like me, with this laid-back, kinda messy haircut and a jacket that looks thrifted but cool. He's holding a set of keys and gives me this surprised, almost amused smile. "Hey," he says, "you here for the apartment too?" I nod, because what else am I supposed to say? Yeah. Guess we both got the same bright idea. We introduce ourselves. He's named Jason. Turns out, he spotted the exact same Craigslist post this morning and decided to swing by after work. We're basically standing in the same awkward spot, both thinking, well, this is weird. The landlord hasn't shown up yet, and the building feels kind of like a toss-up between charming and falling apart. The peeling paint, the creaky stairs, the faint sound of someone playing guitar somewhere upstairs. It's not exactly a dream pad, but it's a start. Jason cracks a joke about needing to fight me for the place, which honestly makes me laugh more than I expected. Usually, Craigslist apartment stuff is stressful, but this guy's vibe is easygoing, like he's just as tired of the whole rental hunt as I am. We end up chatting about the usual stuff: rent prices, the craziness of city living, how impossible it is to find anything affordable that doesn't smell like a mix of old carpet and bad decisions. As we talk, I get this weird feeling that maybe this isn't just another rental showing. Maybe there's something else going on here. Then, right when I'm starting to think this whole thing might actually go okay, the landlord buzzes us in. And just like that, everything's about to change. The door buzzed, and we both reached for the handle at the same time, which was somehow both awkward and kind of perfect. The landlord was a short, intense guy with wireframe glasses and a clipboard that looked like it had been through a lot. He gave us a quick once-over and then said, "Right, you both want to see the unit?" Jason and I exchanged a glance. Neither of us wanted to be the guy to back out first, so we both nodded. We climbed the creaky stairs, the kind that groan under every step, and I felt my stomach flip-flop just a little. I mean, this apartment wasn't going to be a palace, but it had to be better than my last place, a closet-sized room with a neighbor who practiced opera at 3 a.m. When the landlord unlocked the door, I was hit by that familiar smell of old apartment. You know, the mix of musty carpet, faint cooking smells from the last tenant, and that weird chemical undertone like cleaning products gone wrong. But what caught my attention wasn't the place itself. It was Jason. He stepped in first, walking around like he already imagined himself living there. I caught him eyeing the cracked kitchen tiles and the scuffed countertop, but his expression was thoughtful, not disappointed. We both started poking around, asking the landlord questions about utilities, lease terms, and how long the place had been on the market. Somehow, the landlord seemed more interested in us than in the apartment itself, asking questions like, "What do you do for a living?" and "Are you neat?" Jason and I ended up standing by the window, looking out over the street below. The setting sun made the buildings glow a bit warmer than they actually were, and for a moment, all the stress about rent and moving faded into the background. Jason broke the silence. "So what's your story? You new to the city?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Sort of. I moved here about a year ago, trying to make it as a graphic designer, but the rent's been a nightmare." "You?" "Kind of the same," he said. "I'm a copywriter, freelance mostly, so stability is, well, a joke." He smiled, but there was a hint of exhaustion beneath it. We laughed. It felt nice to talk to someone who just got it. The grind, the uncertainty, the constant juggling act. The landlord interrupted with another round of questions, and that's when things started to get a little competitive. He said only one person could have the apartment, and he'd be making a decision by the end of the night. Jason and I exchanged that look again, the one that says neither of us wants to lose, but neither really wants to fight either. Before I could process it, Jason leaned over and said, "Hey, what if we ask if we can split it?" "Like roommates?" I blinked. "You mean live together?" He shrugged. "Why not? We're both in the same boat, and it's way cheaper that way." Part of me wanted to say no instantly. I don't know, there's something about sharing your space with someone you just met that feels like a huge leap. But another part of me thought, maybe this was exactly the kind of unexpected thing I needed. I looked over at Jason again. His eyes were honest, no games. Suddenly, this Craigslist apartment didn't feel like just a place to crash anymore. It felt like the start of something different. The landlord looked skeptical when we brought it up, but after a few phone calls to the property manager, he agreed to let us apply as roommates. We swapped numbers right there, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to work out. As we walked back down those creaky stairs together, the city lights flickering on around us, I caught myself smiling. Meeting Jason like this, random, awkward, but strangely comforting, was the last thing I expected tonight. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where it all went from here. A few days later, after we'd both submitted our applications and jumped through more hoops than I thought possible, Jason and I met up to figure out the logistics. We grabbed some coffee at this little hole-in-the-wall joint a couple blocks from the apartment and sat across from each other with our phones out, comparing schedules and coordinating the move. It felt weirdly natural, like we'd been roommates for a while instead of two strangers who'd met because of a Craigslist listing. Jason's grin made the whole process less stressful. He made jokes about who would claim the window seat in the living room, and I caught myself laughing more than I usually do in these kinds of situations. "So, we're really doing this, huh?" I said, stirring my coffee and looking out the window. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I guess we are." There was a pause, and I realized I wanted to know more about him. Not just the surface stuff, but what made him tick. So I asked, "What brought you here? Like, to this city, this neighborhood?" Jason took a slow sip of his coffee, then leaned back. "Honestly, I needed a fresh start. I was stuck in a job that pleased me the life out of me, and a place that felt more like a cage than a home. Moving here was a chance to hit reset." I nodded, resonating with that. "Yeah, I get that. I moved here chasing a dream, but ended up just trying to survive." He smiled softly. "Maybe we're both just trying to find a place where we belong." That line stuck with me all day. Moving day arrived faster than I expected, and suddenly I was carrying boxes up those same creaky stairs, thinking about how different everything felt now. Jason was there too, balancing a huge duffel bag and grinning like he was about to start an adventure. The apartment looked the same, but this time it felt less like a temporary stop and more like a new chapter. We spent hours cleaning, unpacking, and debating whose furniture went where. Jason had this old record player he insisted on setting up right away, and before long the room was filled with this warm crackling from vinyl, mixed with our easy chatter. That night, we ended up sitting on the threadbare couch, sharing a takeout pizza that was probably too greasy, but tasted perfect in that moment. We swapped stories about awkward dates, bad breakups, and the weird quirks of the city. Somehow, it felt like I'd known him for much longer than a week. At some point, the conversation slowed, and I found myself watching him more than I wanted to admit. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his hand brushed a stray hair back behind his ear. There was a silence, comfortable but charged. Jason looked over, catching me off guard. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how weird life is. How sometimes the craziest moments turn out to be the best ones." He smiled again, this time softer. "Yeah, here's to weird moments." That night, as I lay on the couch, half listening to Jason's music and half lost in my own thoughts, I realized this wasn't just about finding a cheap apartment anymore. It was about finding someone who got it. Someone who saw the same cracks in the world and still found a way to laugh through them. And maybe, just maybe, this Craigslist coincidence was the start of something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. The next few weeks settled into this strange but comfortable routine. We fell into the kind of rhythm that only happens when two people start sharing a space, but without all the awkwardness of forced conversations or territorial battles. Jason was an early riser. I was definitely a night owl. He'd be making coffee when I was just getting home from late shifts, and I'd catch him already at his laptop, typing away, with his steaming mug beside him. One evening, about 2 weeks after we moved in, I came home to find him on the couch, headphones on, eyes closed, tapping his foot. I dropped my bag and flopped down beside him. "You look peaceful," I said, nudging him. He pulled off the headphones and grinned, playing some chill electronic stuff. "Helps me unwind." "Mind if I listen?" I asked. He handed me one side of the headphones, and I leaned in closer than I usually would with a roommate. The music was mellow but pulsing in a way that felt like it was syncing with my heartbeat. We sat there in silence, sharing the headphones but not saying much. It was one of those moments where everything felt just right, even if nothing was really happening. Eventually, Jason broke the silence. "You ever think about how weird it is? Two strangers end up in the same tiny apartment in this huge city, like some cosmic joke." I laughed. "Yeah. I mean, I was ready to fight you for the place. And now, here we are." He smiled, that easy, genuine smile that I was starting to find hard to forget. The unspoken tension was beginning to grow, and honestly, it was kind of thrilling. Living together meant we saw each other in all kinds of light. Messy mornings, bad hair days, the way he hummed when cooking. It all added up to something that felt like more than friendship, but wasn't quite anything else yet. One night, maybe a week after that headphone moment, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a noise from the living room. I shuffled out, half asleep, and found Jason sitting on the couch, the glow from his laptop screen lighting up his face. "Can't sleep?" I asked, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. "Yeah," he said, closing the laptop. "Brain won't stop racing." I sat down beside him. "Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "It's just, everything feels so uncertain right now. Work's been slow, money's tight, and I guess I'm scared that he gestured around the apartment, "this whole fresh start thing might just fall apart." I nodded, feeling a pang of my own fears. "I get it. I'm scared too, but hey, at least we're in this together." He looked over at me, and for a moment, the vulnerability between us was palpable. Then, almost as if he was testing the waters, he reached out and brushed a hand against mine. My heart skipped a beat. Neither of us said anything, but the contact was electric, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe this was the beginning of something new. Days turned into nights where we found excuses to sit closer, to share more, and to learn the small details about each other. The way Jason's laugh could fill the room, or how he always remembered to buy peanut butter even when we were running low on everything else. I started making breakfast just so I could see him early, and he started leaving little notes on the fridge for me when he went out. One Saturday, we decided to take a break from unpacking and explored the neighborhood together. We wandered through the streets, stopping at a tiny bookstore Jason loved, then grabbed iced coffees from a corner cafe. Walking side by side, I felt a calmness that was rare for me. At some point, he looked over and said, "This feels like the start of something good, doesn't it?" I smiled, feeling it in my chest too. Yeah, it really does. That night, back in the apartment, the tension between us finally broke. We were sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes, when I noticed Jason looking at me differently. He took a breath and said, "I've been wanting to say this for a while. I really like you." My stomach flipped. "I like you too." And just like that, what started as a Craigslist coincidence had become the beginning of something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. That night felt like everything shifted. We were still sitting there on the floor, the half-unpacked boxes around us like silent witnesses, and suddenly, the apartment didn't feel like a space we shared as roommates anymore. It felt like home. Jason's eyes were searching mine, a little bit nervous but hopeful. I swallowed and took a deep breath. "I'm glad you said that first," I admitted, smiling. He smiled back, that same easy grin I'd been drawn to since day one. "I wasn't sure if you felt the same." Honestly? I thought maybe you didn't. I laughed softly, the tension breaking just a little. Living together, trying not to mess this up. I guess I was scared. Me too, he said, but I'm tired of hiding how I feel. The moments stretched out between us, quiet except for the hum of the city outside, and then, without another word, he leaned in, and I met him halfway. Our first kiss was a little messy and shy, but real. It was like all the nervous energy we'd been carrying evaporated in that instant. I'd never felt more sure about anything. The days that followed were a soft blur of getting used to this new dynamic. We kept talking, learning how to navigate the shift from roommates to something more. There were awkward moments, of course, like the time I accidentally barged into the bathroom while he was in the shower because I forgot we were sharing the place. Or when he caught me hiding my terrible dance moves in the kitchen. But those moments only made things feel more genuine. One evening, a few weeks later, we were curled up on the couch watching a cheesy rom-com we'd both seen a dozen times. Jason rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt this warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the blanket wrapped around us. You know, he said softly, I wasn't sure I'd find anything real after moving here. But then, I found you. I turned to look at him, the flickering TV light reflecting in his eyes. Same here. It was the kind of moment where everything felt simple and true, even if the world outside was messy and unpredictable. But of course, life doesn't just pause for you to fall in love. A few days later, Jason got a call that shook us both. His freelance gig had dried up faster than expected, and suddenly, the financial stability we'd hoped for was slipping away. We sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out, trying to make sense of what to do. I don't want this to mess us up, Jason said, voice tight. I reached across the table and took his hand. We'll figure it out. Together. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a Craigslist apartment or two guys trying to save money. It was about trust, partnership, and whatever else life threw our way. So yeah, meeting Jason because of some random Craigslist listing was the start of one hell of a story. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it goes next. After that call, things got real in a way I hadn't fully expected. Jason's freelance gigs drying up wasn't just a bump in the road, it was a crash landing. We both knew the rent was already tight for me, and now, with his income gone, the pressure was on. But the weird part, instead of driving us apart, it pulled us closer. We spent that first night after the news on the couch, legs tangled together, talking through the mess of anxiety and what-ifs. Jason was the first to break the silence. I hate feeling like I'm dragging you down. I shook my head, pulling him a little closer. You're not. We're in it together, remember? He looked at me like I'd just said the most important thing in the world. And honestly, it felt like it was. There was a quiet strength in knowing someone had your back, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. The next morning, we made a plan. Jason started applying for more steady jobs, real ones with a paycheck and benefits, the kind neither of us had really considered before, and I picked up some extra freelance gigs on my end. We crafted budgets, trimmed expenses, and had some of those awkward, who buys toilet paper this week talks that feel so mundane but suddenly mean everything. Living like that, scrappy and stretched thin, wasn't glamorous. The apartment was still that slightly crumbling place with the peeling paint and the noisy neighbors, but it was ours. And every night, coming home to Jason's half smile and that tired but genuine way he'd say, "Hey," was worth more than any fancy place I'd dreamed of. One evening, a few weeks into the job hunt, Jason came home with a little box in his hand. I was half expecting some goofy snack or a random trinket, but when he sat down and opened it, inside was this old-looking key on a simple leather strap. "I found this at the thrift shop today," he explained. "It's just a key, but it reminded me of that day we met, like a symbol or something." I laughed, but honestly, it hit me right in the chest. This key wasn't just a key. It was a reminder of the turn our lives had taken, from strangers fighting over a Craigslist apartment to something real and fragile and worth fighting for. Weird how life works, huh? I said, taking the key and sliding it onto my own keyring. "Yeah," Jason agreed, "but I'm glad it brought us here." We sat there for a minute, just holding hands and watching the city lights flicker through the window. It wasn't perfect. Hell, we were barely scraping by. but it was ours. A few nights later, after a long day of job interviews and sending out resumes, I found Jason sitting cross-legged on the floor, headphones on, sketching something in a notebook. I sat down next to him, curious. What's that? He showed me a series of little drawings, cartoonish versions of us, the apartment, the messy chaos of our days. I laughed, recognizing myself in a scribbly stick figure holding a coffee mug, and Jason with his trademark messy hair. "This is great," I said. "You should keep doing that." He shrugged, looking a little shy. "It helps me make sense of the chaos. And, well, it's nice to have something to hold on to when things feel uncertain." I nodded, feeling how true that was for me too. We'd built something together. Not just an apartment share, but a small world where we belonged. That night, we stayed up late, talking about dreams that felt too big for the cramped apartment, but still alive in our hearts. Jason talked about writing a novel someday. I shared ideas for a design project I'd been dreaming about, but never started. We promised to keep pushing each other, no matter how slow it felt. And that's the thing about this whole Craigslist apartment story. It wasn't just about finding a place to live. It was about finding someone who saw you in all your messy glory and wanted to build something with you anyway. Someone who turned the random and chaotic into something steady and real. As we finally drifted off to sleep, tangled together on the couch, I realized maybe we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Not because the apartment was perfect or the timing was easy, but because we showed up for each other, just like that day, standing awkwardly outside that brick building, neither of us expecting what would come next. And that, honestly, feels like the best kind of luck. There was something about those quiet moments, just the two of us, the city humming outside, and the soft glow of the apartment nightlight, that felt like the calm inside a storm. We'd had our share of ups and downs, but sitting there together, tangled in blankets and each other's company, it was clear we'd built more than just a roof over our heads. Still, life wasn't about to let us off the hook that easily. A few days later, Jason got a call from a place he'd interviewed with, a small marketing firm that, while not his dream job, offered something close to stability. When he told me, I could hear the mix of excitement and nerves in his voice. It was a start, a chance to catch a breath. That night, over a dinner we made from half-forgotten ingredients in the fridge, we toasted with 2 cheap beers and talked about what this new chapter might bring. "I'm scared," Jason admitted, poking at his food. "But I want this. I want to be more than the freelance guy always worried about the next paycheck." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I get it, but you're not alone in that. We've got each other, and that makes all the difference." There was a softness in his eyes that made my chest ache, in a good way. It wasn't just about finding a roommate or a cheap apartment anymore. It was about finding something solid to hold on to, someone who'd stick around when the chaos hit. As Jason settled into his new job, our days started to feel a little less frantic. The apartment was still imperfect. The shower leaked a little, and the heating was spotty on cold nights, but it was ours. And with that, everything felt a little warmer. One Friday evening, after a long week, we decided to celebrate with a movie marathon. We piled blankets and pillows into the living room, ordered takeout, and spent hours laughing, sharing popcorn, and occasionally stealing kisses between scenes. At one point, Jason turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find this when I moved here. Not just the apartment, but you." I smiled, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "Me neither. It's the craziest coincidence, but I'm glad for it every day." He reached for my hand, their fingers intertwining with mine. Same. That night, as we laid in the dark with the city lights filtering through the curtains, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Meeting Jason because of some random Craigslist apartment posting was the last thing I expected, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. We had no idea what the future held. Job changes, bills, the usual city struggles, but we had each other. And sometimes, that's all you really need. As I drifted off to sleep beside him, I thought about how weird and wonderful life is when you least expect it. 2 strangers, a Craigslist listing, and a crumbling apartment turned into something real, something steady, something worth fighting for. And honestly, I can't wait to see what comes next. Months passed, and with every little change, Jason's job settling into a steady rhythm, my own projects picking up pace, we grew more comfortable in this shared life. The apartment still had its quirks. Some days the heater gave out. and the creaky stairs reminded us they were still there. But none of that mattered much anymore. What mattered was that this place, the one we stumbled into together, had become home. One lazy Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves sitting by the window, sunlight streaming in, and dust motes dancing in the air. Jason was sketching in that notebook of his, and I was flipping through some design drafts. The quiet was easy, the kind that only happens when you're with someone who feels like the missing piece you didn't know you were searching for. He looked up from his sketchbook and caught my gaze, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know," he said, "if someone told me a year ago that I'd be here in this apartment with you," I laughed softly. "Yeah, me too. But I'm glad I took that chance," he continued. "Showed up to that apartment like some clueless guy on Craigslist, because it led me to you." I reached over, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "I'm glad too. It's crazy how a random listing can change everything." There was a pause, then he leaned in and kissed me. A soft, steady kiss that spoke of all the moments we'd shared, the uncertainty we'd faced, and the quiet hope we held on to. Pulling back, I whispered, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I want to face it with you." He nodded, eyes shining. "Me too." And in that small, imperfect apartment, with the city bustling outside, I felt something simple and profound. Love doesn't have to be flashy or perfect. Sometimes, it's just two people showing up, choosing each other day after day, and building something real out of the unexpected. So yeah, that Craigslist apartment, it wasn't just a listing or a roof over our heads. It was the beginning of us, and honestly, that's more than enough.